This is GCO 8. This video will cover worksheets 2 and 3. These worksheets basically establish a new way to do some proofs, or a new way to organize some proofs. What ways have we done it before? Well, we kind of did what I would call a paragraph proof. That was like when we established that the exterior angle theorem, or when we proved that vertical angles were equal. We basically described a step-by-step logical methodology for why things would work that way. There are things called flowchart proofs. We haven't looked at those, but a flowchart proof basically is the idea of establishing something and then saying from that we would also know this, and from that we would know more, and kind of flowing through the concepts. Paragraph proofs probably are the ones that get established in higher level mathematics, but one common way is a two-column proof. That's just a way for saying to organize your ideas into kind of an organized column technique. The way most of these two-column proofs work, first of all, they'll give you some information. So they'll tell you a few things here. Then they will also tell you what they want you to prove. So if they give you some facts to start with, they'll tell you what you are to prove. And sometimes there's a diagram here to help you make sense of what they gave you, as well as what they want you to prove. Now, the way a proof in two columns works, now if we were doing a paragraph proof, we would just describe, I know this because of this, and I know this because of this. In this case, you would say, well, maybe you'd say, well, I know angle A is the same as angle B. So you make a statement of something you know, and then you would give a reason. You might say, oh, because the vertical angles are congruent. And then you might make another statement, and another reason, and another statement, and another reason. So this is the statements, and then you back it up with good reasons. Now over on this side, the things that you're going to state will be things like facts. They will be things like rules, properties. You will use proven theorems. You will use postulates, which is a tricky word for just basically facts, things that you're given. You'll use kind of the rules of mathematics and things that are already established to help you make reasons for knowing things. Let's show you how it works. So here is an example. You can see here's my given information. Here's what they want me to prove. And here's a diagram to help me make sense of it. So they say, and I like adding it to my diagram, they say B dt, this angle, is the same as GTD. So these are equal. That's what that gives me. And it tells me that BD is the same as GT. So this is kind of the starting conditions, and then they want me to prove that this triangle is the same as that one. A common start is to write down the givens that you've been given. So lots of students don't like this step because they figure, oh, the teacher already knows that. Well, in a proof, you always want everything that you know provided in the physical two-column area. So I knew this because it was given. That's a nice reason. I knew this because it was given. Now I'm done with what I know they gave me. So now I've got to go up here and look for something else that I can find to help me establish congruence. And I notice that dt, this side here, dt, is in both triangles. So I know that dt in one triangle would be the same as dt in the other triangle. And when we say that, this is known as the reflexive property. Now, in a more informal way, you can just say we know that that's true because it's a common side. That it's common to both triangles, so it has to be congruent. Now you'll notice I have enough information to state that this triangle is congruent to that because I have a side, an angle, and a side, angle, side. So now I can say it is true that BTD is congruent to GDT. And how do I know that? I saw a side, an angle, and then a side that were all congruent. So the key is generally start with your givens, find new information and back it up, and then state what they want you to state as usually as your final line there and your reason for knowing it. Let's do another one. Again, here's some given information, what they want you to prove, and a diagram that could help us out a little bit. So let's put down the givens in the diagram. I always like to do that. It usually gives me a head start on what I could do. So lots of information there. And by now, as I said, it's a good idea to write your givens. And this time I'm going to be a little bit more frugal with my space. I'm going to put both my givens on one line and say they were both given to me. You can do that over 2 lines or 1, that's no problem. But I'm done, I need more information. And then I realize that when triangles have, or 2 segments cross like this, you get vertical angles. These 2 angles must be equal. Angle BCA has to be congruent to angle DCE, because vertical angles are congruent. Well, guess what? Now I have an angle, and then a side. An angle, and then a side. So I could say now triangle BCA is congruent to triangle DCE because there's an angle, and then a side that are congruent. You see the pattern of what I'm doing? Usually you start with your givens, establish usually 1 or 2 new things, and then sum up the congruence. One more example, just slightly different, and I want to show you how to work with this. Again, we have our givens, we have the things they want us to prove, and we have a diagram to help us. I'm going to write down the givens just as they gave them to me. B is equal to D, sounds good, that was given. And C is the midpoint of AE, given. Now watch carefully here. What I'm about to do, this is why this example is being done. A lot of students go, oh, that means C is the midpoint of AE, and mark this, which is true, and then begin working from there. Listen carefully. When words or definitions are given in word form as part of a given or as a statement, you should always translate that into more specific information. Let me tell you what I mean by that. You tell me something about a midpoint, I need to know about sides though. So now I should say AC is congruent to EC. And the reason I knew that is because that's a part of the definition of a midpoint. In other words, the fact that you told me it was a midpoint allows me to know that then, oh, those pieces had to be congruent. Always translate word descriptions into physical things about angles and sides. Important step. Now we can go back to the problem. Hey, there's our vertical angle again. And so we can say angle BCA is congruent to angle DCE. Vertical angle are congruent. And now I have my triangle BCA congruent to DCE. And my reason is an angle, and then a side. The key, my friends, is not to assume things that may look good, but we do not know. So You know, maybe it looks like C is the midpoint of BD, but we don't have anything that told us that or hinted to that. So stick to things that are for sure true, things like vertical angles or common sides. Those tend to be the triggers to finding more information.